Here's a story of how I built this 1929 Model A Roadster. This build started in late 2015. Revell had just released their groundbreaking 29 Model A Roadster kit. I had just finished showing my gold 32 Ford Roadster, and I felt like I wanted to build another one, and this seemed to be the perfect start. I loved all the options this kit included, and my plan was to make it even better. So I started gathering a data file of images of Model A Roadsters I liked. This one was pretty fresh one-to-one that was seen about the time that the kit came out. I liked how it was a high boy, but it sat almost lower than a low boy. I wanted the rear wheels nearly in line with the curvature of the back of the body. Here's a photo from a TROG event, and he looks quite pleased. I liked everything about this one except for the grille. It was at this point I decided this car with a track nose would look just right. So I started looking at track roadsters. I got interested in the mid-50s style. These hot rod track roadsters were inspired by the Indy style roadsters of that era. Since I was already heading in this direction, when it came time to choose what engine to use, an Offenhauser 270 seemed to be the most appropriate. Now it was time to collect some parts. Although no longer in business, American Racing Miniatures offered these Indy style wheels with dirt track tires that were just the right size. They also offered this nicely detailed Offie 270. These are duplicates of some of the long out of production parts mastered by Chris Itzel. Next was a track nose from Model Car Garage. Then it was a shopping trip at Replicas and Miniatures Company of Maryland for a quick change rear end with a buggy spring and some Kinmont disc brakes. Now it was time to go off to the races. I started with the Highboy 32 Ford style frame in the Revell 29 kit. The rear was cut off and a 10-inch kick-up was created from evergreen plastic. The rear crossmember was taken from a Revell 29 Ford sedan. And while I was cutting up frames, I decided to add the center section from a Revell 40 Ford to really make it look beefy. The front suspension was used as is from the Revell 29 kit, just mounted with a suicide perch to get it really low. Then I moved on to fitting the body and track nose. My original design had a hood with it, and it was part of this build up until just before paint, and then I abandoned it. The Halleck style windshield frame was also from Replicas and Miniatures, and really completes the style of this roadster. The next step was to scratch build the exhaust. The Offie has oval exhaust ports. The header started with aluminum tubing that I crimped to blend to the individual round exhaust pipes made from bent plastic rod. These were then pinned and glued to complete the header. The goal was to have the header match the curve of the body line and still have clearance to allow the passenger door to open. My previous two roadsters were both supercharged, and I wanted to keep that theme going. I found a collection of detailed photos of the Drake-style supercharged Offie and decided that a blower hanging out of the side would create a unique look. A Replicas and Miniatures Scott-style blower was used, and I scratch-built the intake manifold. The blower drive system was fabricated from parts box pieces to be something similar to the crank-driven setup seen on the real engine. Now it was time to start refining all these parts. The beginning of the prime, sand, repeat. The floor required a lot of work to fill all the gaps, and I wanted to retain the stock style stamping. A sprint car style steering box was added since the Offie was a bit in the way. I liked this look anyway. The steering box is under the dash. At this point I was also fitting the dash and door panels. The 40 Ford transmission has now been added. More engine work. I found the scoop from the surf rod was a perfect fit. The radiator was scratch built from evergreen and photo etched screen. The Parts by Parks headlights had to be mounted just right. I used aluminum rod to create their stanchions. Even the oil lines for the dry sump were test fitted before paint to ensure they would fit nicely along the frame. About this time, life and other projects kinda got in the way. It was September of 2018 before I would start messing with this one again. By then, I had moved on to white primer. and was testing the foil transfer wrap for the muffler. I was still fine-tuning all of the smaller bits as well. Life got busy again, and it was toward the end of 2019 before I began painting. The engine was first. Then detail began to be added. I moved on to finishing the wheels next. I knew these one-piece assemblies would be difficult to paint with sharp lines. They came out okay, but I was thinking about how to separate them. I contacted Norm Weber at Replicas and Miniatures and asked if he could help. He had the original Etzel's pieces and offered to separate the wheel from the tire and cast them as separate pieces. I continued to use the one-piece parts until the revised versions arrived. In February of 2020, it came time for the body color. I knew it would be lavender. I sourced violet pearl pigments from Painting with Pearls and mixed this in decanted U-POL 2K clear. I typically paint the body last to avoid excessive handling, but I couldn't resist a mock-up before the final clear coats. Once all the lavender was painted, it was time to start assembling. I set no deadline for the completion. The pandemic was in full swing, so there would be no reason to rush it. Here I'm in the middle of adding the brake lines from 15 thousandths wire with scratch-built brackets. The interior was finished in a very light gray with a darker gray along with shading effects. The banjo steering wheel is from Model Car Garage, and the auburn gauge panel is from Replicas and Miniatures. I tried to create an abalone-like effect in the gauge panel, with various pearl pigments dipped in clear for some added detail. Other details include scratch-built floor mats with piping, and a 6-piece shift lever. The pedal assemblies are also very detailed with separate pads, linkages, and floor bezels. By October 2020, the new wheels from Norm had arrived, so I decided it was time to do the final assembly. I was ready to focus on another project anyway. Here I am assembling the interior for the final time in preparation of getting the body mounted to the chassis. One of my favorite details are the headlights that were sourced from Czech truck models. They are extremely realistic. That's the story behind this Model A Roadster. I hope you enjoy seeing how this model came together, and perhaps it inspires you to build a Roadster of your own. I have many more models on the shelf and plan to show them in future videos. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe because I have all kinds of model car stories to tell. Thanks for watching. You're still here? Alright then. You can watch this one go round and round.